Okay, this is, thank merciful heavens, going to be a super short podcast that is going to just quickly overview some of the different ways that the different animal phyla deal with um, excretion of waste, with excretory systems, or if they lack excretory systems altogether. We'll talk about this in class, but very quickly. You can imagine that lacking tissues and so many other things, of course, phylum Porifera has no excretory system, so they rely on diffusion, just out of their cells into the surrounding water. Phylum Cnidaria, again, having only two tissue layers, no mesoderm, same thing, relying on diffusion of waste just from their cells out into the surrounding water. It's not until we hit phylum Platyhelminthes, the flatworms, that we start to see a some, at least, minimal development of an excretory type system, if you will. Okay? Now, before we get to that, I do want to review this particular slide with you. Okay? Central to these excretory systems that we're going to be looking at in the next just few slides is that if animals regulate where they put certain solutes, water follows the solutes. Okay? Now, that makes sense if you think in terms of, let's say we've got, just in terms of a single cell. Okay? And if I put my cell in a cup of extremely salty water, okay, so this water has lots of solute. My dots represent solute, salt. Okay, lots and lots and lots. But there's more water relative to this cup inside the cell. Well, there's more solute out here. The water in the cell is going to flow from an area of high concentration to low. It is going to go where the solute is. Okay? It's going to go to where there is less water and more solute. So what I want you to remember, as we are trying to control, as animal systems are trying to control where water goes in an animal, it can do that if it can control where certain solutes go. Okay? So, water handily follows the solutes. And generally speaking, many animals control where water is in their bodies by controlling where the solutes are in their bodies. Okay? So, if you regulate solute movement, you regulate water movement. This is a really handy little concept to remember, especially when we start talking about human kidney function, which we will do in the next podcast. So water follows the solutes. Okay? Now, as I said, phylum Platyhelminthes, the flatworms, is the place where we first start to see some development of something that you could begin to call an excretory organ. Okay, even though they don't have real fancy organs, remember they don't have a body cavity, we do see something referred to as a proto, meaning first, nephridium. Now this root right here, neph, if you can remember that neph is always associated with excretory organs. Okay, we're going to see those letters pop up again and again as we talk, especially critical in the human system. All right, a protonephridium is basically as this says, a tubular excretory system. As you can see, the little planarian here, which has had its skin removed, so we can see it's these little organs such as they are. It's basically just a bunch of little tubes, so not very sophisticated at all. It's a bunch of little tubes, and we're magnifying these tubes here so that you can see this tube, which is here, has little bulbs attached to it. Here's one, and here's one that's been cut open so that we can see it. And then these little tubes with the bulbs have an opening to the outside of the body, so that would lead to the outside. Now, they're branching throughout the body. The flame bulb, okay, that's one of the little bulbs down here. We're showing it in some detail. There's cilia in this bulb. It's called a flame bulb because someone that observed it at some point, seeing the little cilia twirl, beating and twirling, thought it looked like a candle flame. So it's a flame bulb. It's just a structure with beating cilia, okay? And the cilia, as they beat, like a little whirring fan, draws fluid from inside the animal into the bulb, and then into the bulb, here we go, and then it goes out through the pore opening out of the body, okay? So into the bulb, through the tube, to out of the body. So urine really dilute. Remember, these are freshwater critters, and so they're just going to be doing this all the time. It's very, very dilute. Water is coming into their bodies all the time through osmosis. This is a way of getting it out, and they've got to get this excess water out or their cells will explode. So it empties this, all this excess water just empties into the environment through their pores. And that fluid is extremely dilute. There is some urine type waste, but it is largely just excess water that the planarian is taking in all the time. So this is an important little concept to remember. These guys are mostly concerned with osmoregulation, water regulation, getting all this extra water out of their bodies. It is an energetic process. Beating of cilia takes a lot of energy, so this is going to use ATP or energy to do that. Okay, nitrogenous waste, of course, it gets mixed in with the water and goes out like this, but also it just diffuses from high to low concentration across the body surface and from the cells directly into the environment. Okay, so that is the protonephridium, very, very primitive little excretory organs. Now, as we are getting up into the segmented worms, we're just going to kind of pass over the nematodes and head to these segmented worms here. This is phylum Annelida. Okay, and we're passing over the mollusks as well. We see some greater sophistication. Okay, what you will note here is this meta, meaning middle. We've kind of advanced from the proto now, and notice we've got that neph again, nephridia. What we have here is another tubular system, and we've still got the cilia, the little ciliated openings. They're going to be right here is where you're seeing that, and they're going to be beating and collecting fluid, and that fluid will pass. Notice how this is arranged. Here's a segment, here's a segment, here's a segment, and the opening of this tube is actually in the segment that's in front of it that beats, draws the fluid out into this long, look what's happened to the tube. It's gotten very long and convoluted, and it winds around, and if you'll look what else is associated with the tube, lots of little blood vessels are associated with the tube, surrounding the tube. That's not trivial. We're going to focus on this some more when we get to mammals, okay? Oops, sorry. Okay. Now, that's called a nephrostome. Nobody's going to ask you that if they do, they're a jerk. So, something to keep in mind. Every single segment of a segmented worm has these excretory organs. So every single segment has these. It's just not one or two, it's every single segment. And they are immersed in the body fluid. Remember, this animal has a body cavity, and these are inside. These are well-developed organs hanging out in the body cavity of every segment. They are wrapped in capillaries, okay? And as such, waste from the blood can diffuse across capillary walls into this tube as well, excess water and so on. So these tubes truly are performing excretory function and water balance function, unlike the flatworms, which are really just water balance organs. Okay? Now, the next on our list is insects. So we're in phylum Arthropoda. Not all arthropods use this. Insects do. Crustaceans would be something entirely different. But insects have structures called Malpighian tubules. That must be after the guy that discovered them, but honestly, I've never looked it up. If you look here, what you see in pink is the gut of the insect. Here is a mouth. Here is an anus back here, and so food goes in to the gut, it gets digested, passes through, and then waste comes out there, okay? Now, we are zooming in on this gut in this picture down here, and what we see are these little ribbons of tissue, little tubes of tissue, but close-ended tubes, extending off of the gut. These are the Malpighian tubules, and essentially what they are doing is they are absorbing, as you can see, salt, water, and nitrogenous waste from the body, the rest of the body of the animal, from the body cavity, and they are passing that salt, water, and nitrogenous waste into the gut, where the poop is being made towards the end of the gut, and all of this poop and all of this nitrogenous waste as well is going to be eliminated as solid waste. Okay, so it's a little bit different from us. Our solid waste is a separate deal altogether from our nitrogenous waste. In insects, it's all pushed out together. So attached to the digestive tract, removes nitrogenous waste, also functions in water regulation, and is excreted with solid waste. I already said that. Now, next is lots of detail on our excretory system, which we will do in a separate little podcast. All right? Thanks for watching. That's the end of this one. See you soon.